Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I have a few people finishing up getting their meals and will join us. We look forward to a terrific forum luncheon today, and wonderful peer and dear friend in the industry, Chris Eyler, has joined us today, and very special to have him in the state of Oregon. At this time, I would like to welcome up our president, Mike Herron from Vips Industries.
I got two scripts here, so I'll make sure I grab the one that says open. I want to welcome you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our forum series luncheon. Excited to have you all here today. Brought again in our annual sponsor by Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions, and then today's monthly sponsor, PacWest Lobby Group, Ryan Trebbit here to my right, who we'll be hearing from shortly. So before we do that, though, we'd like to start with a moment of prayer, followed by the national anthem sung today by Katie Arnold from Rich Duncan Construction. So if you'd please remove your hats and stand with me. We take this time to pray and reflect on our lives and on this moment. We are thankful for the meal before us, for the hands that prepared it, and for those who serve it. We are grateful for this day, for its blessings, its opportunities, and its challenges. May we lend each other strength and wisdom as fellow leaders within the Salem community and continue striving to always give our best and have the courage to rise to the challenges we face. Amen. Katie.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you, Katie. Katie's a project engineer at Rich Duncan Construction. She's also very involved in the chamber in volunteer capacity, including with Salem Emerging Leaders and on our annual First Citizen Banquet Committee, and also some other ad hoc committees, a lot of committees that I've seen you on, always willing to step up when called upon. So thank you, Katie. Next, I'd like to introduce our head table. Starting to my left here, we have Stephanie Camp, Benefit Specialist at Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions. Immediately to my left, Chris Eyler, Vice President of Congressional and Public Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. To my right, Ryan Trebbit, CEO of PAC Northwest Lobby. To his right, Tom Hoffert, CEO of your Salem Area Chamber of Commerce. And to Tom's right, we have Jackie Roche, who is our Membership Manager at the Salem Chamber. Please join me in welcoming our head table. We also have a couple of local leaders in attendance today that I want to recognize. We have Kaiser City Council member Soraya Cross and Salem Mayor Julie Hoy. Let's welcome them. So if you are a past president of the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce or a current board of director member, please stand and be recognized. I also want to welcome any new members that are in attendance today or anyone here for their first time at a forum lunch. So for the second season in a row, our partners at Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions serve as the Forum Speaker Series presenting sponsor and have prepared a brief profile of their company.
You know, one of the things that I grew up with was leaving this community better than you found it. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about Hagen Hamilton, because they have the same mentality. You know, in a time where businesses are leaving the state or getting purchased by out-of-state corporations, I'm just so thankful to be with a company that is as invested in the community as my legacy. Many of you know who my dad is, Mike McLaren, who was a rock star in this community. And my goal is to follow in his footsteps, and if I could just do a little bit to be like him, that would be meaningful to me.
I recall when the first time we talked to Chris, he talked about the intentionality of Hagen Hamilton wanting to leave their community better than they found it. And for a company with over 100 years of service history, I would say they've already done a lot of that groundwork, but it's a commitment and it's a mindset within their employees of wanting to make sure that Salem and the communities they serve are healthier tomorrow than they find it today. That's something that is in total alignment with the Salem Chamber.
We on? There we go. I want to thank again the John family for your continued support, and those from Hagen Hamilton. I see Chad, TJ, we got Chris and Stephanie here from the Hagen Hamilton team that are here with us today. Thank you again. I would now like to invite Mr. Tom Hoffert back to the podium.
Well, thank you. When you have the opportunity to serve as CEO of a membership organization, a nonprofit advocacy organization, you take that role extremely seriously. And I am very proud to have studied this industry for quite a few years. And a very interesting statistic jumps out. Businesses that are members of their local chambers have a 76% stronger and more resilient business foundation than those that are not a member of a chamber of commerce. Now, how do you break down numbers and what do they really mean? The fact is, in business, we have a lot of choices of where we invest, and there are so many nonprofits, schools, churches, so many people counting on the support of our local business community. And I applaud all of you for being involved in so many different parts of our community. But out at its foundation, chambers of commerce are the only economic engine, the only engine in our community ultimately tasked with economic security. That is paychecks, making sure people are receiving the dignity of a paycheck and that our economy can grow rather than continue to recede. And so I point that out today because we at the Salem Chamber love our members. And as we grow as an organization, which we have, we continue to bring in more and more individuals who have never experienced what a Chamber of Commerce is. If you are within your first year as a member of this organization, would you kindly stand and proudly show that you are a newer member of the Salem Chamber? We welcome you, and we understand it's not always easy coming into new groups and getting to know people, but we have a wonderful group called our ambassadors that will welcome you in. And the people that you're surrounded with around you at this lunch believe very much in this city. There are a number of businesses exiting this state right now due to political climate, regulations, taxation. And so for those of us who choose to stay, we need to be rallied and partnering with those of like mind who believe in keeping our dollars locally with each other. We have a very special staff team at the Salem Chamber and an individual who goes out each and every day to connect with you, our members, and to grow our membership, meaning the people that you know who may not yet have had the opportunity to experience the Salem Chamber yet, is Jackie Roche, and she's at the end of the table. Jackie would love to take you out for coffee. She's got a great preloaded gift card at Isaac's. Share a conversation and expand business. The team at Local is here, and we just shared a little breakfast and coffee conversation with them not too long ago, and you're going to be hearing big things from that company who just joined this organization. And they're planting their flag right here in Salem, joining all of you. At the Chamber, we like to have fun too. And when we have a new member join, hearkening back to traditions, in fact, Zachary Zalicki over here will probably smile a little bit when he hears this, we ring the bell inside the office. Jackie? When we do that inside the office, we go crazy. We go nuts. All the rooms in the hallway light up. Everybody wants to run down and ask Jackie who is a new member of this organization. So if you would, over the course of the next couple days, think about who amongst your friend group would enjoy getting in touch with an organization doing incredibly relevant things to make sure we are strengthening this community and they're representing you well at the city, the county, and the state. I'd love for you to share coffee or have your friend share coffee with Jackie Roche, and I promise it'll be a worthwhile 30 minutes of their time. It is now my opportunity to introduce Ryan Tribbett, CEO of PacWest Lobby Group. PacWest Lobby is a name synonymous with making big results occur locally in Oregon. Ryan has a professional staff team that are specialists in different fields across many different categories that need key influence when it comes to state lobbying at the Oregon State Capitol. But they're much more than that. They're also a public relations firm. If you need your messaging, if you have critical initiatives that need to be deployed in Oregon, I encourage you to look up Ryan Tribbett and the PacWest Lobby team. Join me in welcoming May's Forum Speakers sponsor, PacWest Lobby Group, President and CEO, Ryan Tribbett. Thank you, sir.
Hey, everybody. Ryan Tribbett, President, PacWest Lobby. Tom asked me to talk a little bit about the company. My company is really my staff. And I know you guys see me a lot because I'm the one who interacts with the chamber most frequently, but let me tell you a little bit about my staff. My lobby team's actually headed up by a guy named Mark Long, who ran the Building Codes Division and the Department of Consumer and Business Services and the Department of Energy. He worked in state government for over 45 years, 35 of which as agency director, as a fix-it guy. He knows how to navigate behind the curtain and the cloak of government processes better than anyone I've ever met in my life. Been a mentor for me since I was in my 20s. Another guy who works for me, who plays a big role on the lobby team, is former Senator Rick Metzger. As it suggests, he was a state senator for 12 years. One of my first jobs in politics was actually as his legislative assistant. After I stopped working for him and went into the lobby, he actually got an appointment from President Obama to run the Federal Credit Union Bureau and ran a federal agency for 6 years, so into one of the longest holdovers into the Trump administration in their first term, something I think gives us a real nice bipartisan flavor and gives us a federal liaison that a lot of other firms just don't have. We also have a very impressive, I think one of the most in the state in terms of budget expertise, Phil Shoyers. He worked for 10 years for the ranking Republican on the Appropriations Committee called Ways and Means. That's just a little background on the team that make possible the things we're able to do for our clients. And but that's right, Tom mentioned that we're not just a lobby firm, and a lot of people think of us as that, and that is our sort of lead doing business as name, but we have Pacific Northwest Communications that's led by Daniel Wattenberger, a gentleman who was 10 years working as an editor for the East Oregonian newspaper, and at his side, George Plavin, who's here at the front table, who worked both at the East Oregonian for several years and for the Capitol Press, which is like the paper of record for everything that's ag in the state. So I think we have a very impressive team. That's why we're able to take on the kind of projects that we have, like for the Chamber and the alternative revenue project that we took on. So we're proud to be special projects managers as well. I do think we're more than the sum of our parts, though. Everyone on our team focuses on public service first and giving back to the community. Myself specifically, I serve on 4 different nonprofit boards and event planning committees for First Citizens, memberships, Proud Chamber Ambassador. But I'm here today to introduce our speaker, Chris Eyler. So I'm honored to introduce this month's forum speaker. He's from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As Vice President of the Congressional and Public Affairs, we had the opportunity to hear fascinating D.C. insiders' perspective on new federal policies and their impacts on our local economies. Chris Eyler received his bachelor degree from Miami University and his law degree from University of Oregon. Before working for the U.S. Chamber, he had an impressive career on Capitol Hill, including working as staff counsel for the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, advising ranking member Mike Enzi from Wyoming on post-secondary education and national services issues. He also served as legislative assistant for Senator Frank Murkowski of Alaska, Senator Conrad Burns of Montana, and Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas. Please join me in welcoming Chris Eyler to the Salem Chamber.
Great. Well, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Tom, for inviting me here today. As Ryan said, my name is Chris Eyler. I am the U.S. Chamber's Vice President for the Northwest region. What that means is, as part of our advocacy work back in D.C., we maintain 7 regional offices around the country to work directly with our state and local chamber partners. So my role is to work with Tom and Jameson and their colleagues at all of the local chambers here in Oregon, as well as Alaska, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. We do this because we want to make sure that you are a part of our advocacy work back in D.C. We want to make sure that you, as some of our most important members, are aware of what's going on in Capitol Hill that directly impacts businesses here in Salem. So I just want to begin by thanking you for supporting the work that Tom and his team do at the Salem Chamber, but also for what you're doing to support our work back in D.C. We really could not do what we do without being able to point to the support of local chambers like you. Thank you. So what I want to do today is, Tom and I were talking since the Oregon legislature is in the midst of starting to wind down. Things back in DC are really starting to pick up. So I'm going to walk you through what's going on in DC that impacts businesses and that what we are focused on getting done this year and during this Congress. So to start with, I do want to set the table a bit and give you a sense of where things stand on Capitol Hill. Right now, Republicans have unified control of government. They won the White House, the Senate in the November elections. This is the first time since 2018 that Republicans have controlled both the House, Senate, and White House. However, it's an extremely tenuous control. And that's because when you look at the House of Representatives, they have a 220 to 213 seat majority with 2 vacancies. Those 2 vacancies sadly came because 2 members died earlier this year. They were both seats held by Democrats, and we expect that they will be replaced by Democrats when those seats are filled. So ultimately, you're looking at a 220 to 215 seat majority. What this means, though, is Speaker Johnson can only afford to lose 2 of his members on any given vote. And when you look at the makeup of the House Republican caucus, that's going to be harder to do than it may seem at first. The House Republican caucus is extremely divided. There are a number of different opinions when it comes to fiscal matters in particular, and we are seeing that play out as we speak in the current debate over whether to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I'll get to in a minute. Over in the Senate, Republicans have a little bit more control of things. They have a 53-seat to 47-seat majority. That means they easily can control the committee agendas, and they can easily control the floor agendas. However, it doesn't mean they can move most pieces of legislation without some degree of bipartisanship. And that's because most pieces of legislation that go through the Senate on regular legislative order tend to be subject to a filibuster. And to overcome a filibuster, you need at least 60 votes. So on most legislation going through the Senate, and there are a few very important exceptions to this, but on most pieces of legislation appropriations bills, authorizing bills, there still will need to be some degree of bipartisanship, and at least 7 Democratic members are going to have to cross the aisle and vote with their Republican colleagues to get legislation to the president's desk. As for the Oregon congressional delegation, your delegation currently consists of Senator Wyden, Senator Merkley, and 6 members of the House of Representatives. And with respect to Senators Wyden and Senator Merkley, Oregon is in a fairly good position to have their interests heard and represented in the U.S. Senate, despite the fact that both Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden are in the minority. And that is because Senator Wyden, even though he is not the chairman anymore of the Senate Finance Committee, he is the senior ranking Democrat on that committee. And that committee is arguably one of the most important, if not the most powerful committee in the Senate, as it has jurisdiction over tax, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and international trade policy. As for Senator Merkley, he is the ranking member on the House or the Senate Budget Committee. This is a fairly important role in the Senate Democratic leadership. So both your senators, again, are fairly well positioned to be at the table and represent this state's interests. It's a little different story when it comes to your House delegation. What's most notable about your House delegation is how junior it is. When you look at the 6 members, with the exception of Representative Bonamici, all of your House representatives have been elected since 2020. Now, this doesn't mean that they're not effective. They're all very capable, very competent legislators. But what it means is that it's going to be some time before a member of your House delegation is in a position to chair a full committee, as former Representative Greg Walden did on the Energy and Commerce Committee, or former Representative Peter DeFazio did on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. As for this Congress, they have a short but very heavy list of things that they need to do this year. We saw earlier this year, the first thing that they absolutely had to do was fund the government. The government was going to run out of funding in mid-March, and they came right up to the deadline and passed the final omnibus appropriations, or continuing resolution, to fund the government through the end of the fiscal year, largely on a party line vote. The next inflection point, though, is going to be a lot more difficult, and that's because they will need to raise the debt ceiling. In January, the federal government hit the statutory debt ceiling of $36 trillion. The Department of Treasury is using accounting mechanisms that they refer to as extraordinary measures to continue spending money. However, on Friday, the Treasury announced that they would exhaust their ability to do that by early to mid-August. So at some point over the summer, they're going to have to raise the debt ceiling so that the government can continue to spend money. Now, they are going to try and do this as a part of the larger bill that the president has asked for to provide additional funding for border security, additional funding for domestic energy production, and to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And this is the part I really want to focus in on today. At the end of this year, all of your taxes, and taxes on businesses across the country are scheduled to go up. And that is because the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which lowered rates on individuals, it raised the standard deduction on individuals, and it included a number of very important deductions for businesses of all sizes, is scheduled to expire. This is the business community's top priority for the year. We simply cannot afford, given how shaky things are in our economy right now, to see taxes go up across the board on individuals as well as businesses. And I think it needs to be clarified here, because I think it does get mischaracterized a little bit in the media. We're not asking for new tax cuts. What we're asking for is a continuation of what is currently in law. All of these rate cuts that would be extended are what are currently being applied in law. All of the individual rates, all of the deductions. We just want to see those continued. And we want to see those continued because, by and large, the 2017 law has worked. When you look at what the Congressional Budget Office was projecting prior to passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, compared to what happened after they passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, most economic indicators have performed much better. We have seen GDP grow faster, we have seen wages grow faster, we have seen investment grow faster. So we want to see these tax cuts continued beyond the end of the year. To put this in a little more perspective locally, I do want to zero in on one very important deduction, and that is the 20% pass-through deduction. What this deduction is, when Congress lowered the corporate rate from 35% to 21%, they wanted to make sure that small businesses were not put at a tax disadvantage to larger businesses. Most businesses are small businesses. And in this state, Oregon is a small business state with a handful of exceptions. In Oregon, 54% of employment at for-profit, private sector businesses is at pass-through entities. These are sole proprietorships, partnerships, S corporations, the overwhelming majority of small businesses. Nearly 356,000 businesses claimed this deduction, and it has meant a $3 billion collective tax benefit to businesses, small businesses in Oregon. Again, if Congress does not act to extend the 2017 law, this deduction goes away and taxes go up on small businesses. Now, we are finding that this is news to a lot of people, and it's news to a lot of small businesses even. So we have created an online tax calculator to give you a back-of-the-envelope estimate on what it would mean if this tax deduction goes away. And you can access that tax calculator by using the QR code on this slide. But again, it's extraordinarily important that this deduction in particular is extended. Right now, under the current law, one of the few things that does not expire is the lower corporate rate. But the 20% pass-through deduction for small businesses does expire. So we want to make sure that this gets through and gets extended. Now, going back one second, where do things stand with Congress's efforts to extend the 2017 law? Right now, as we speak, they are going through the process of holding committee markups and putting together a bill that would extend this law. And what they're doing is they're using a mechanism called budget reconciliation. What budget reconciliation, the benefit of budget reconciliation is it cannot be filibustered in the U.S. Senate. It can be passed on a simple majority vote. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy. As I said, the House Republican caucus in particular is divided when it comes to fiscal and budgetary matters, and we're seeing that play out right now. A number of very conservative members that refer to themselves as the Freedom Caucus have said that they want very significant budget cuts in order to get their votes to pass this legislation. At the other end of the spectrum, a number of more moderate members are pushing back against efforts to cut Medicaid. And then there's another separate group of members largely from New York, New Jersey, and California that want to make sure that the ability to deduct state and local taxes from their federal income taxes is no longer capped. Right now, there is a $10,000 per person cap on the ability to deduct so-called SALT taxes. And those members have indicated that they will not give their vote to pass this legislation if the speaker doesn't lift that cap. So right now, you're seeing Congress try to pull together a bill. It isn't pretty, but they are at least moving in the right direction, and we are hopeful that this will get done. The speaker has set Memorial Day as a deadline to get this done. That's probably a little ambitious. We're hoping that it gets done by the end of the year or by the end of the summer. But they have a hard deadline here because, again, remember, they have to raise the statutory debt ceiling by August, and that increase is a part of this bill. The other area we are most focused on right now is an area where we don't necessarily think things are moving in the right direction. And that is because the president, as we all are well aware, has a strong affinity for the use of tariffs. And we disagree strongly with the president when it comes to his use of tariffs. Our economy, this nation, did not become the wealthiest, largest economy in the world by simply trading amongst ourselves. We did it by selling to the 95% of the world's customers who live outside our borders. Trade is a huge part and a huge driver in our economy. Nearly 41 million Americans' jobs are tied to trade. 1/4 of farmland is planted for export. 1/2 of our manufactured goods are exported. We're not just talking about big business. Of the 300,000 businesses that export, 97% of them are small and medium-sized businesses. Here in Oregon, you have 510,000 jobs that are tied to trade. That's nearly 1 in 5 jobs here in the state. You export $36 billion in goods and services to over 190 markets around the world. Your largest export markets are Mexico, China, and Canada, 3 of the countries that the president has zeroed in on in his trade war. And then your biggest exports are computers, electronic equipment, transportation equipment, and machinery, all industries that create high-paying jobs here in Oregon. So where do things stand right now? And this slide very well could change by the end of this presentation based on some tweet. In fact, it has actually changed in the time since I made it on Friday, as it was announced that there has been some agreement reached with the Chinese. But as of Friday when I made this is where things stood. There are Americans who import goods from Canada and Mexico are subject to a 25% tariff on goods that are not subject to the USMCA agreement. Goods imported from China were subject to a 145% tariff. That's nearly an embargo level tariff. And then goods coming in from pretty much everywhere else around the world were subject to a 10% tariff. In addition to that, there are 25% tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum, and 25% tariffs on imports of automobiles. Now, again, as I said, this has changed. This morning, the White House announced that they came to an agreement with the Chinese to pause the tariffs on Chinese imports, or at least they're going to lower them to 10% plus the 20% fentanyl tariff. So goods coming in under this agreement will be subject to a 30% tariff for the next 90 days. Goods being imported by the Chinese from the U.S. will be subject to a 10% tariff, again, for 90 days while the two sides negotiate. But that being said, these tariff levels are still a 4-fold increase compared to what they were at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, the average U.S. tariff was 2.5%. We are now subjecting imports to at least a 10% tariff. And there's still potentially more on the way. They are looking at potentially applying tariffs to semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and lumber and copper, as well as large trucks. These are nothing more than taxes on you and me. Tariffs are paid by the importer at the port of entry, and they are by and large passed along to the end user and their customer. We estimate that prior to the agreement that was announced this morning, the tariffs that the president had imposed would make Americans roughly $4,000 poorer. Second, they only serve to hurt the people the president says he wants to help. He says he wants to help domestic manufacturers. But 56% of all imports into the U.S. are the components, raw materials, and inputs that domestic manufacturers need to make things here. And then third, they inevitably result in retaliation from the country that we are imposing tariffs on. And in the case of the Chinese, when we had the 145% tariff level, they had responded by imposing a 125% tariff on American imports to China. Likewise, we are already hearing reports that the EU is working on a package of retaliatory tariffs if negotiations do not work out with the EU. This is not a secret. And this is one of the few things that you're going to find that Americans by and large agree on. People look at these tariffs, and by 70%, they believe that costs are going to go up on goods and services here in the U.S. The other thing to keep in mind too is that we have a very complicated supply chain right now. Just because something says GM or Ford or General Electric or Boeing does not mean that it's 100% American. Particularly with the auto sector, you look at a car, it has roughly 30,000 parts. Those automobile companies source their parts from all over the world. And I think this infographic really illustrates well what we're talking about here. This is just one part of a Chevy Silverado truck. It is the aluminum casing for the suspension. It starts off in Quebec, it goes to Mexico, it gets sent to Ontario, then North Carolina, back to Ontario, before it ultimately ends up in the final assembly plant in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is true for multiple parts in a car, and it's why you frequently hear people say that a car manufactured in the US has probably crossed the border 5 or 6 times before it gets to the showroom. Every time it's crossing the border, those parts are subject to tariffs. And that's why you see these estimates ranging from anywhere to $5,000 to $15,000 that these tariffs will increase the cost of cars. And while we're talking about, while a lot of the focus is on big business, we are really concerned about what's happening to small business. Big businesses have the cash and the sophistication to pay the tariffs and move their supply and look for other countries to source their supply chains through to lower the costs of tariffs. Small businesses don't have that ability to do that very easily. And these 2 quotes really illustrate what we're hearing a lot of from our small business members. It's a lot of, they're terrified. The top quote in particular talks about how the president's approach to tariffs has made a lot of foreign customers, particularly in Canada, not willing to even want to deal with them. And then the second quote illustrates just how much the cost is increasing on small businesses to the point that they don't know that they're even going to be able to keep their doors open beyond the end of the year. We estimate at this point, we have on our website, similar to the debt clock that you see in Times Square, we have a tariff clock. And right now, as of Friday when I made this slide, the cumulative cost of tariffs to small business, we estimate to be roughly $29 billion. And that is increasing at a rate of $9,379 every second of every hour of every day. Now, we don't expect the president to do 100% about face. That's not in his nature. Even though we would like him to back off and go back to where things were at the beginning of the year. But we are urging him to take steps to mitigate some of the harm that's we are seeing being inflicted on small businesses. For one, we would like a blanket exemption or exclusion for all small businesses who import. 1/3 of all imports are going to small businesses. And as I said, small businesses just don't have the cash on hand or the sophistication to deal with these tariffs the way that big businesses do. Second, we'd like an exclusion for items that simply cannot be purchased or found here in the US. A lot of the things that we import are things that are not grown here, they are not manufactured here. The most commonly cited example is coffee. You cannot grow coffee in the US except for 2 places, Hawaii and Puerto Rico. And as much as I'm sure that those coffee growers in both Hawaii and Puerto Rico would like, they cannot meet the needs of domestic coffee shops. We need to look elsewhere to meet the demand for the supply of coffee. Likewise, there are other things that are simply just not economical to make in the US. Doing so would increase the cost of things like iPhones and other manufactured goods to the point where they would be unaffordable. So we would like it so that there's an exclusion for things that you simply cannot get here domestically. And then third, we would like an exclusion process put into place where businesses could apply for an exclusion on an expedited process if there is a real risk to employment in the US if those tariffs stay in place. We are working with the administration to try and meet them halfway and get some of these exclusions in place. But as I said, ultimately we would like to see the tariffs lifted altogether. And it's important to note that it is already taking a toll on the economy. As we saw 2 weeks ago when the most recent GDP numbers came out, the economy actually contracted by 0.3% or 0.3 or 0.3% for the first time in several years. Now, this was before a lot of the tariffs were put into place on April 2nd, but it is being driven directly by what's happening with tariffs. And that is because businesses have been trying to get out ahead of all the tariffs, and they increased their import activities to stock up on things to get out so that they wouldn't be subject to tariffs. And when the way GDP is calculated, imports are subtracted from the GDP number. But it's also because there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Businesses don't know where to invest. They don't know if they're going to, if they should build a facility here in the US or if they should build it overseas. They don't know where they should put their money because things keep changing from day to day. And this is why we have seen expectations for economic conditions to get worse go up dramatically in just the past couple months. People just don't know what to expect, so they're sitting on their money, both individuals as well as businesses. So again, this is, in addition to the tax bill, this is our other major focus right now, and we're hoping that we can find a way to get that tax bill across the finish line, but also encourage the president to walk back some of what he's doing on tariffs. So while I've got you all in a good mood, let's talk about the next the 2026 elections, because even though they are more than roughly 18 months away, it's never too early to talk politics. So for starters, it is too early to really make any hard and fast predictions on what's going to happen. And anyone who is predicting and telling you this is what's going to happen, I encourage you not to listen to them. Because right now, even though it looks bad for Republicans, November 2026 is a lifetime away in political terms. What we do know, however, is that the last 2 decades of our politics has really been marked by continuous disruption and uncertainty. And what do I mean here? When you look at the election cycles between 1960 and the year 2000, there were 20 election cycles, and in only 7 of those 20 election cycles did you see any kind of change in control of government, meaning only 7 election cycles resulted in a party change in control in the House, Senate, or White House, or some combination of those 3. Starting in the year 2000 through the most recent federal election cycle in 2024, there have been 13 election cycles, and 11 of those election cycles have resulted in either the House, Senate, or White House, or some combination of all 3, changing party control. Voters have become very fickle over the past 2.5 decades, and they're taking it out on their elected officials. Second, none of our elected officials is particularly popular right now. President Trump's current approval rating stands at roughly 45%. That is only slightly better than where he stood at this point in his first term. And as for Congress, their approval rating, though it has improved slightly since last summer, currently stands at 28%. People just aren't happy with what they're seeing in government. And then finally, when we look at both the House and Senate, even though all 435 House seats are up for re-election, only a handful of them are even considered competitive. The Cook Political Report right now estimates that there's roughly only 19 House seats that are considered competitive. Of those 19, 10 are Democrat, 9 are Republican. What more, only 17 seats are currently held by a representative from one party in a district that voted for a presidential candidate from another party. Of those, 14 Democratic members of the House are currently in congressional districts that voted for President Trump, and only 3 Republican House members are in congressional districts that voted for Vice President Harris. Over on the Senate side, every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up for cycle. In 2026, 33 senators are in cycle. Of those 33, 20 are currently Republicans and 13 are Democrats. But again, you're not seeing a lot of competitive races amongst those who are in cycle. A lot of the tension is going to be placed on Maine, North Carolina, Georgia, and Michigan, as these seats are probably likely to be some of the most competitive. But of the 33 seats that are in cycle, only a handful are going to be competitive. And what you're looking at is Democrats would need to pick up 4 seats to retake the majority. That is actually going to be harder for them to do than it may at first appear. So again, there's uncertainty both in our politics and as well as in our economy right now. Businesses, we have a lot of optimism that we will be able to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act by working with Congress. We're a little more frustrated when it comes to the situation with tariffs because it is causing a lot of uncertainty in the economy. And then again, there is quite a bit of uncertainty going into the next election cycle. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but again, I can't give you any certainty on any of this, but that's where things stand at the moment back in DC. Again, thank you for everything you do to support this chamber, and thank you for everything you do to support our chamber.
We have a mobile mic. I believe Barb is going to take around.
Thank you. I appreciate all those numbers. I was just curious. My name's Jeremiah. I'm actually running for the school board, so I'm hopefully getting to affect the future of our students and businesses as kids get released into the working world. With all the percentages of the tariffs and stuff, what was China charging American goods going over to China? Do you by chance know what that number is?
I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay, I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah. But based on the agreement that was announced this morning, it'll be 10% now for at least the next 90 days. Yeah.
Hey, thank you for nice overview. My name is Ernesto Toshkovic. Question, how is U.S. Chamber of Commerce looking at resolving $1.2 trillion U.S. trade deficit? Obviously, for years, we have been printing money to finance it. So how do we resolve that? And another question is, United States depends for about 11% on exports for our GDP. China is 20%. Germany is 56%, I believe. So I do believe that we have the strongest negotiating position in this trade war. How do you guys look at that?
Well, I think, our position has always been that the best way to approach this is working with other countries to enact trade agreements. When you look at, I think we roughly have about 16, we're currently party to, I think, 20 trade agreements with countries around the world. Those countries represent just less than 10% of the global population, yet they buy over half of our exports. When we are able to come to an agreement with a country on a trade agreement, we see that our exports to those countries go up. And so that's why we've always been an enthusiastic supporter of things like NAFTA, the USMCA, or TPP when it was actively being negotiated. So that's the approach we would like to see moving forward. When we have those trade agreements that lower barriers overseas, we see our exports to those countries go up. As for our trade deficit, a lot of the reason we have such a huge trade deficit is because we don't save. We spend all our money. We want to buy more than we actually can manufacture here. And one of the problems with the approach that the president is taking, that even if we were able to bring all of this manufacturing back to the U.S., we don't necessarily have a lot of excess capacity. We don't have the workforce to fill all of those factories. We still have more job openings now than we do have people on unemployment. We just don't have enough workers. And some of the president's immigration policies are making it harder and harder for businesses to find workers, because when they cannot find the workers with the skills they need here, they want to look overseas, and there are visa programs in place to allow them to do that, but it's getting more and more difficult to even bring people in from overseas to fill those job openings that we can't fill with people here. So again, I think our focus would be on working to expand the use of trade agreements. And you're right, we do need to take into account that we spend a lot of money and we spend a lot more than we bring in tax revenue.
Hello. Hi, back here.
Oh.
Hi, Ryan Albritton. I just want to say that these things I'm going to say are not, they're my opinions, not those of my employer. So I'm struggling a little bit, with all due respect, with the presentation, because it really is a one-sided argument of kind of how these things are playing out. If you look at the economy overall and you consider business investment, you look at government spending, and then also you have consumer spending. If you look at the first 3 months, first quarter GDP negative 0.3, one could say that cyclically, we've been in the same cycle for 16 years as a country, and we have never gotten out of that because we continue to spend more money. I find it concerning that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce would push that things go back to normal, which means there's more government spending. Because I'll tell you, the take that I've been used to at our Chamber of Commerce locally is we want our government to live within their means and to figure things out, just like the private sector has to. So that's concerning to me. When you look at the consumer, we've got $1.3 trillion in consumer credit card debt. We're seeing defaults spiking. There's more month than there is money. So it doesn't shock me that there's a little bit of contraction in the economy because we've just continued to print into infinity. It was just talked about today on Twitter that the president's new plan is going to cost $4 trillion more as far as the new tax plan. I would just say it would be great if, it seems like we have enough money because we print it, okay, and it goes everywhere else except the United States. So, so one would ask, why should we even pay taxes federally? Okay, that's one thing. And I would say, just for conversation, I would like to see the U.S. Chamber of Commerce go to the president and say, let's talk about a flat tax. So everybody's paying taxes. That's the same percentage, not the same amount, of course. And then lastly, I'll just say, to your last point, as far as we don't have enough workers in this country to facilitate all these jobs that are coming back. Well, I think that's interesting. Maybe we're too easy when it comes to unemployment and programs that cause people not to have to work. And we could actually get people back into their jobs, bettering themselves, bettering their lives, and bettering our country. So those are just a few of my thoughts, and again, not those of my employer.
Well, and I do want to be, I do want to be clear here. We agree with you that more needs to be done to rein in federal spending. Don't be mistaken there. We do think that Congress and the president need to get serious about the current level of the deficit as well as the debt. It's unsustainable. But they need to focus in on what is driving the debt and deficit, and that is the nearly 2/3 of federal spending that is on autopilot: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Now, it doesn't mean we're not arguing that there should be cuts, but we should look at how these programs operate. Social Security is nearly a 100-year-old program. When it was created, 16 workers paid into the system for every retiree. Now 3 workers are paying in for every retiree. Not enough money is coming in to support the rapidly growing population of retirees. So we need to look at how Social Security is structured and how we can get more revenue going into that program. Same thing with Medicare. This is a health care program that was developed in the 1960s, and it largely hasn't changed. We need to look at how we can better provide health care through the Medicare system that isn't increasing costs as rapidly as it is. Medicare is actually a bigger problem for the federal debt right now than Social Security. As far as the number of workers go, we have surveyed our members, we have done a number of surveys, and what we're finding is that, yes, there are a number of people who have not returned to the workforce following the pandemic, but there are a lot of factors there, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of available, affordable childcare. And we are looking for ways where this can be addressed so that people can return to the workforce and leave their children in reliable childcare. But this has been a persistent problem going back prior to the pandemic. We have seen for almost 10 years now, there have been businesses just cannot find the number of workers, but more importantly, they can't find the workers with the skills that they need. So we need to do a lot more too in terms of training up workers to fill those jobs.
Oh, thank you. I got the mic back here. And thank you for the interesting, if not inspiring message. It's kind of scary. Shout out to Jackie R. up there. I had coffee with her. I'm still a future member. Scott Pillsbury from Rose City Label. Two things. First, everybody that is kind of to the point someone else said, everybody that's talking about, we're getting what we deserve, these reciprocal tariffs are just getting back at the other guys because they've been doing it to us for so long. And I would love to know, just as someone asked, where can we find that information? Because I don't know if that is true. Are we really leveling the playing field? Or is this just an exorbitant tax? I'd be curious to know if you have a place we could look to find that information. Second thing, and again, repeating what was said earlier, the beginning talk about the $36 trillion. I'm an owner of a small business. I benefit from the pass-through QBI 20%, and I love that, but sadly, we need to cut spending and raise revenue. And nobody wants to say that out loud, but we have got to get our house in order. So thank you for your presentation.
Yep, thank you. Going back to the tariffs, I don't have off the top of my head, a singular source you can go to. But I think, one of the things that should be kept in mind is that when you apply tariffs like this across the board, there are legitimate targets. And we have been very clear that we probably need to move a lot of the supply chain away from China, particularly when it applies to things like the medical sector, the national security sector. But we still want to be able to trade and sell goods to the Chinese. The other thing to keep in mind as well is that when you apply tariffs like this across the board to every single country, not every country is created equal. A lot of these tariffs are being applied to countries that, sad to say, are not particularly wealthy. And you look at some countries in Africa, like the country of Lesotho, we run a pretty significant trade deficit with that country, but that's because their one export is largely gemstones. They are otherwise a very poor country, and they cannot buy a lot of the things that we export. So it's a country that likely we would continue to have a trade deficit with, irrespective of tariffs. So my point being, does it even make sense to impose tariffs like that on a country that has something we need that we can't get domestically? Likewise, we're imposing tariffs on countries we run trade surpluses with. Australia, the United Kingdom, we run a surplus with both of these countries, yet we're still imposing tariffs on them. These are two countries, not just with respect to our economic partnership, these are countries that are geopolitically important to us, that have been allies with us for over a century. Why are we punishing their companies like this?
Thank you for being here today, first of all. My question is about the exemptions you talked about before. I think you said there were two big categories that you were hoping for movement from the president on. And my question is, I suppose, A, what is the likelihood you think that will happen? But more importantly, B, Do you expect that that will happen in a one-on-one conversation between the secretary and the president, or are there other factors involved in one of those two or both of them, those exemptions happening?
I don't know. I mean, this whole thing is playing out in a lot of ways that, like just this morning, this whole agreement that was announced with the Chinese, the agreement that was announced with the British on Friday, there's a lot of things, it's taking a lot of twists and turns. But we want to, our advocacy is making sure that we get out the story of the companies that and the communities that are being hurt by this, and what he could do to alleviate that pain. And the three things, as I explained, an exemption for small businesses that import, an exemption for items that you can't get domestically, and then an exclusion process that companies could apply for if there is a danger of significant harm to domestic employment.
I was just curious what the chamber felt about streamlining regulations. A lot of times it feels like we aren't competitive with other countries due to the regulatory state in the U.S. and particularly here in Oregon.
Yeah, this is something that we have been focused on for years. And in fact, during the latter part of the Biden administration, there was some significant progress where they put into place provisions to modify or make the first reforms to the National Environmental Policy Act in nearly 50 years to lower the amount of time it takes to get permits. Right now, for most infrastructure projects, it's taking on average 7 to 10 years to get all of the necessary federal permits. That's too long. It shouldn't take longer to get the permits than it does to build the actual project. So we are urging Congress to do broad-based regulatory reform to make that process work more smoothly. Likewise, when it comes to trade, yes, there are non-tariff barriers to trade. Particularly with respect to the EU, one of the most commonly cited examples is that if a pharmaceutical product is approved by the FDA here in the U.S., it's not necessarily approved for use in the European Union. Well, that doesn't make sense. If the FDA approves of something, or if its counterpart in the EU approves of something, there should be some kind of reciprocity given, so that a pharmaceutical company doesn't have to go through the same process on both continents. And this was something that had been, during the Obama administration, they had been working on negotiating an agreement with the European Union called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership that would have addressed a number of those non-tariff barriers. Anything else? Well, I want to commend you. You all have had more questions and more challenging questions than most chambers do. So thank you. Again, I really appreciate you having me here today, and I look forward to coming back, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Wow, we are ahead of schedule, and if you sat on the board, you would know that I'm pretty good about getting things wrapped up early. So couple people that I want to thank here before we leave today. Katie Arnold from Rich Duncan Construction for singing the Star Spangled Banner. Never easy, but you did a fantastic job. Allied Video Productions, Capital Community Media, and Salem Convention Center for providing all the logistics, for making this event happen. To Ryan and Pac West Lobby Group for your support of the Salem Chamber and sponsoring today's forum. And thank you to our Forum Speaker Series Luncheon presenting sponsors at Hagen Hamilton Insurance Solutions. Next, I want to highlight a couple of opportunities for you to get involved, other ways for you to get involved with the Chamber. Coming up next Tuesday, May 20th at 11:45 at Roth's West Salem, the Chamber businesswomen will meet and hear from Lenita Dunlap. She's a nonprofit and fundraising leader, and she will be speaking on public speaking, and it's too bad I can't go. Probably need it. Then next Thursday, May 22nd, Salem Chamber will host the next Lead Business, Small Business Series event featuring Raymond White from Salem Health. He will be speaking on cultivating a dynamic staff culture. Tickets are only $25 on salemchamber.org. And we want to thank, I didn't see him here today, but we wanted to thank President-elect Ted Ferry of State Farm Insurance for presenting the Lead series. And then next month, we celebrate our annual Business of the Year Awards luncheon. It occurs on Monday, June 9th at 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. right here at Salem Convention Center. I believe it's upstairs, I think. Is it upstairs? Well, we hope so. It's upstairs. Annual celebration is made possible due to our partners at Willamette Valley Bank. Thank you to Ryan and his team. And is highlighted by our recognition of our Businesses of the Year, as well as our Leadership Salem cohort graduation. And you do not want to miss this. Tickets are only $20 per attendee, so bring all of your team, bring your friends. It's a very uplifting event, again, happening June 9th. Then this is a great reminder, on behalf of the Board of Directors team, we want to remind everybody, vote, right? It's your civic responsibility, and when we sit here and talk about the issues, it's no good talking about it if you don't get out there and vote. So May 20th, next Tuesday, make your voice heard, vote on the Chemeketa Community College bond, vote on the city operating levy, the livability levy. We're selecting a new city councilor for Ward 6, and we have our Salem Kaiser School District candidates as well. So please vote. And finally, I want to close today with our flower centerpiece giveaway. It's a selected attendee, and each time this is brought to us by our friends at Roth's Fresh Markets, and they get the beautiful centerpiece that they've provided for us today. And today's winner is Ruth Miles from Salem Health. So congratulations, Ruth. And thank you all again, and I'll see you on June 9th.
Mama say you stop or I'm gonna tell her.